Hello and welcome to First Contact here in the diplomatic core of Live Long and Podcast. With us tonight for this First Contact, well, I should say I am your contact host, Davan. And with me, my two Daves. We have Cousin Dave, little cuter Dave.
Hello.
Ahoy, hoy.
We are your diplomats for this evening. And with us, we're very happy to say, is writer of the upcoming Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, Derek Tyler Attico.
Hey, thanks for having me, gentlemen. It's been it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy to talk about the autobiography with you guys. This is going to be fun.
Welcome.
Very much pleased to see you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
They say my copy will be delivered October 10th, so can't
All
wait.
right.
I'm
Happy to
setting
hear
the
that.
day aside. Yeah. Let's get those pre-orders going, people.
Let's get those pre-orders, please, people.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Get the pre-orders, get them in. So October 10th, we can all open it up, myself included, and read it and be like, oh, this is great.
Oh, yeah.
Orders are great, but you know what's better than orders? Pre-orders.
Pre-orders.
Trust me, people, try it.
That's right.
It feels great. Well, first off, why don't we? Where did you get your start? Where are you from?
Oh, that's an interesting story. So, obviously, I'm Derek Tyler Attico. I started a friend of I've been writing for a while. I started writing in high school. I wrote actually a Star Wars script in high school, and I gave it to my English teacher, like to check and to check grammar and stuff for me. And unbeknownst to me, she entered it in a contest, the Dramatists Guild of America, and they were doing a contest with high school students. They were picking 12 out of 12,000 across the country, and I was one of the 12 that won. So that was really amazing. And it's funny because that script had a lot of themes that we saw in like The Force Awakens and stuff, which was like nuts. That's when I realized I could actually write, and I had something. But then fast forward from then till 2005, and a friend of mine he tells me, he says, hey, they have this contest called Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And it was this contest, this anthology series put together by Simon & Schuster through Pocket Books. And what they did was really great. No one has really done it since, is that they allowed everyday fans to write stories and send them in to Pocket Books, Simon & Schuster, and submit a short story dealing with Star Trek, any series, any era, just submit it, and it would be taken a look at by editors over at Star Trek, and by the Star Trek lit editors, and they would take a look at it, and if it was good enough, it would get in. They would pick 10 stories a year, and for the 2005 edition, which by that time was Strange New Worlds 8, my story was one of the ones selected, and I took first place. And that story was Star Trek Alpha and Omega, which actually I have. It was my first professional gig. First place. Very happy about that. And so that was my, start into writing professionally. And I was like, oh wow, maybe I can do this thing. Maybe it's and I think to kind of like to kind of get your feet wet in the Star Trek universe, and for that was really a big deal for me. But I didn't know a lot about writing, about the entertainment side of writing, so it took me a while to understand all that and get that going. Then come around 2016 was the 50th anniversary of Star Trek, and Strange New Worlds had ended by that time, but they brought it back for that year only for the 50th anniversary, and I wrote another Strange New World story, and this one was a Deep Space Nine story called The Dreamer in a Dream, and that one got in.
Did that play off of like Far Beyond the Stars?
It played exactly off Far Beyond the Stars.
Oh, man.
I think that's the greatest episode in the history of television.
Isn't it a phenomenal episode?
Oh, I cry every time like the sister.
Yeah. I mean, you can't.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of our first deep dives into a specific episode or treatment was just into that because we felt like it really. I mean, honestly, you could spend hours talking about it, just the beauty of the structure of the thing. But yeah, anyway.
It's just a great episode. And in that short story I wrote, it's 10 years later, and Benny is still in an asylum because he won't stop writing. But he's been writing all of Star Trek. So he's written Next Gen, he's written Voyager, he's written Enterprise, and he won't stop. And his therapist has convinced him to write this one last Deep Space Nine story called Deep Space Nine Epilogue. And he's putting all of his anger and animosity in it because, it's 10 years. His girlfriend Cassie has left him. And the Alpha Quadrant is going to hell in this last story. And he doesn't realize that what he's writing is happening. It's going to hell, and some things happen in that story. So it's a very meta story because what he's writing is actually happening,
So that first story you mentioned is in that first collection of stories.
It's in the first collection.
The other one is the second collection?
It's in the second collection, right.
Okay.
And that first one is deals with the Borg and Janeway and Picard and the Q. The Borg assimilate the Q in that one. So,
my goodness!
Wow!
Wow!
I got to put those two books on my order list.
Yeah. These are
whole collected issues of Strange New Worlds.
Strange New Worlds, yeah. And
not to be confused with the show Strange New Worlds.
No,
right.
No.
To not be confused with the show. Before there was a show, Strange New Worlds, there was a collection, an anthology collection of short story books, Star Trek, Strange New Worlds, and there were 10 of them. They were in book form. The 2016 one, which I'm also in, was just an ebook, but you could find that everywhere as well. And it wasn't just me, not to say, it wasn't just me. It was some phenomenal other authors in it. And it launched careers of other great authors. Dayton Ward, he got launched like that. He did I think the first 3 books of Strange New Worlds he was in, and then he was invited to do a novel, and that's launched his career. Jeffrey Thorne, who's now doing stuff for DC and has done Star Trek novels, so it's launched people's careers, and I'm fortunate enough to be one of those people now. The same thing. So
I see interesting parallels in your story. If you don't mind me commenting, and correct me if I'm wrong, just between how you describe your way into writing professionally and the way some of the writers that were writing early Star Trek stories, but also Benny and his circle in Far Beyond the Stars and your story are they're creating these things. But I'm thinking about some of those great old even how the Kazinti come in to Star Trek, right? Gosh, now the name escapes me. But anyway,
the animated series.
Yeah, but they're through another series of novels.
Right.
Author,
right.
They make their way in. I mean, I love this sort of recursive loop between
print
and screen, and then print and other formats of writing.
And Star Trek in particular has always been very not only inclusive, because we know it's been very inclusive, but it's been very inclusive in the sense of opening its doors to people in a way that Hollywood wouldn't normally do. Like, for example, in the 80s, one of the things that Star Trek Next Gen did was it was like, hey, if you want to write for the show for TNG, submit, send stuff. And people did it, and that launched a few careers, on Next Gen. That's how some people got in to write for Star Trek Next Generation.
Right. I think Brandon Braga was one of them.
Right, which is phenomenal, right? I mean, and look at the work that he's given us,
right,
which is just phenomenal work, right? So, I mean, and that's just crazy. So Star Trek has always been kind of trying to bring fans into the fold and saying, we're not talking down to our fans. We believe that they have something to contribute, whether it be scripts or literature or whatever, you know. And I think that's really cool.
Derek, if I could interject there, I'd just like to ask you a little bit about your, I guess, how you you're being a fan of Star Trek, I guess, and where that comes from. So I believe you're from New York.
Yeah, from New York. I'm from New York. Born and bred, raised in Harlem in the Bronx.
Yeah.
I just wrote about this in a essay recently that's going to be published soon. My first Star Trek memories. My father actually was one of those guys that used to fix television sets back in the day when television sets were too expensive and people actually had them fixed before they would just buy another one, right? Because now we just buy another one when it breaks, right? And I remember like my first memory is he would like fix them on the dining room table, and I remember he would like a lot of times which was really weird, he would fix them like while they were plugged in, while they were on. And I remember looking at these two guys on the screen, and one guy was in this gold shirt, and one guy was in this blue shirt, and the guy in the blue shirt was like in pain, and he was like crying almost, and he had his hands on this like rock creature, and I think and I was like, and I was a kid. I mean, I was 6, 7 around there somewhere, and
this guy.
Oh, it's that lava monster from the one with Abraham Lincoln.
Actually, the Horta.
The Horta. You're talking when
Horta.
Yeah, when Spock did the mind meld with the Horta.
That's a good call. There was the Horta in Devil in the Dark.
That's right.
That was the first episode I ever saw.
Different lava monster. Yeah.
The lava monster, right? And that was my first introduction to Star Trek. And so yeah, that was.
And then you write this Star Wars short story. That's kind of your first writing. That's what kind of
that was our
writing
first
start.
Yeah.
But what made you want to write about Star Trek? Like, were you a Next Gen fan, or where's? It's like I know you saw your original series, but
I hadn't. That's a great question because I hadn't really been writing anything, and I hadn't really thought about like writing professionally. I figured I would eventually write something and write professionally. I didn't know what, I was there, and my friend was like, "Oh, there's a contest, you should try." And I was like, "Oh, I know Star Trek," but I wasn't that keen on Next Gen, if I'm gonna be really honest. I was a big fan of the original series. By that time, I had watched some of Next Gen, but I wasn't that keen on it. And I had watched Deep Space Nine, and I was liking Deep Space Nine. But I didn't want to do a Deep Space Nine story because I was like, to be quite honest with you guys, I was like, I do a story, a black guy writing a story about Deep Space Nine and a black guy. It's kind of like expected, I wanted to do something that I didn't think that people would associate with me immediately, and was like, well, let's do Next Gen, and I was like, and also I think it was a challenge to myself because I really didn't like it, and so I started watching it. And in watching it, I was like, oh, wait a minute. This is everything Roddenberry had in the original series. This is everything that I love. And I fell in love with Next Gen doing research and watching it for this. And I just started to like absorb Next Gen. It was just like, it was nuts. So it was like kind of like a reciprocal thing where if I hadn't wanted to my friend hadn't given me the idea to write for this, I wouldn't have really gotten into Star Trek the way I did and fell back in love with it again. Does that answer your?
Yeah. And actually, I kind of can associate too because I remember my dad sitting me down to watch Next Gen when it first premiered in '87, right. And we weren't too keen on it either at first because because all the ways it was different from original series made it feel like, well, maybe this isn't for me or whatever. But it wasn't until years later when it was in syndication that, and I was in grade school by that point or almost high school, and so I was just like, oh yeah, I'll watch this all the time, and then I love this show. But it took a second look, I guess.
Well, he was mean. Picard was kind of mean at the start. Dude, don't be so mean.
Yeah, and I think and they really got their groove third season, Best of Both Worlds, and after they started to soar. Yeah. And the themes and it's really, really started to grab everything that I think Gene Roddenberry wanted to do in the original series, they really picked that mantle up and ran with it, And I just like, oh wow, I really fell in love with Next Gen, and so I wrote basically a Next Gen Voyager story, and it's my first thing that I ever wrote professionally, so I'm proud of it. I think it's a good story, and I don't usually say that, because I'm critical of my own stuff. But I think it's a good story, and people have told me they liked it. So that's
cute. Like that, I just need to go read that story just to understand what happened.
There was a lot of themes in it that are still relevant now. Watching like Picard and his series, it's like, wow, this is really relevant. This is really cool. And I wrote that back in 2005, and it's still, these themes are still relevant, which is really great. It's Borg Supercube has 500 million drones orbiting Earth. It's so big, it's a quarter the size of the moon, and its mass is creating tidal waves over Earth. But all the drones are dormant, and no one knows why. And they're like, what the heck? And then they realize that there's a Borg Supercube over every major power in the known galaxy, and in every quadrant in the known galaxy. They're all dormant. No one knows why. And they're like, oh, we gotta get rid of these things because you don't want to have a Borg Supercube hanging over every major power. And that's how the story starts. So
good start.
Intrigued. I'm
just a low stakes Saturday afternoon.
Right. Low stakes. Nothing's happening.
Just a super cube? Oh.
Right. Nothing's happening.
Before we move on from Far Beyond the Stars, because I'm kind of obsessed with that episode, and since you wrote a story involving Benny Russell, how much of Benny Russell is Benjamin Sisko? I don't know if you can quantify it, but how much of the dream, or how much of the dream is the dreamer? Yeah.
Oh man, that's a phenomenal question, man. I think that's the point of Far Beyond the Stars, right? Because at the end of Far Beyond the Stars, it's that I remember the first time I watched it, and it's that really it was a really powerful episode, but I didn't get choked up personally until that last scene in the ambulance.
Oh yeah.
And he's going through he's going through all of what I call 1950s trauma, right? And then in the ambulance, he's got the glasses on, but he's got his Starfleet uniform on, right? Oh. So visually, filmatically, we're saying, and also, Mr. Avery Brooks directed. So what he's saying is that because he has both of those on, Benny is the dreamer and the dream, right? Mm-hmm. And then when he looks out that window, he sees stars, and not just stars, but stars at warp. That's the journey, right? That's what it's about, right? Going ahead, going forward, going at warp, right? And that's what got me in that moment. I mean, that's what it's about. That's what humanity wants to do. We want to go out there, and that's it. And I was like, oh man, yeah, that's dope. That's dope. And so I think he is both. To answer your question, Benjamin Sisko is the dream, if Benny Russell is the dreamer, and in that story I wrote, you'll see elements of that also, in that story for sure.
Makes me think of this quote, Davan.
You cannot destroy an idea.
That's a great.
The future, I created it, and it's real.
Yeah. That's the one.
That's the one, right? It's just right. It's just
right here. It's just
how can that line not resonate, right, with you?
Well, I always say that Sisko is my favorite fictional character of all time, and I mean, a lot of it I think is because so much of Sisko is Avery Brooks, and he's just such an interesting and an impressive guy. Like, apparently he can do anything. He's like a super good athlete. Of course, he's a great musician, great actor.
And a very interesting Starfleet captain amongst the other captains. I think he's. I think there's a lot of things we can break down just about him. And that's like when I was learning about this project, I was like the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko and the little executive summary that came out with it, with just like why did we never see his siblings? What was going on with this? I have some other things like, does he have like any resentment against Canadians because of Michael Eddington and his loony?
we do need to clear that up.
Right? Right. It's funny. That's funny. I will say, just listening to that clip, there were certain episodes that I couldn't watch while writing the book because I knew like there were certain episodes I only wanted to watch. I mean, because they're all memorized at this point, in my head. But there were certain episodes I only wanted to watch when I was ready to watch them. 'Cause I knew they would have they would hit me emotionally, and I didn't want to like keep rewatching them. I know I'm like, okay, there are this episode. I'm only going to watch them once, and I'm going to during my writing experience. I'm going to watch them and I'm going to write the scene or the chapter or the thing that I need to write, but I'm going to do it right after that because, and I'm not going to say which one. So you guys, you when you read the autobiography, you're like, oh, yeah, I see what you were talking about. Oh yeah, I see, but there were just certain ones I'm like, I'm just going to wait. And then I would watch it and I was like, all right. Okay. Let's write this scene now, because it's just Deep Space Nine does that. I mean, not to say that the other shows don't do that, because there were some really great next gen episodes, but Deep Space Nine has a few of those. It's just like, geez, man, can I have a moment, to just really hit you? So yeah.
In the Pale Moonlight, probably.
In the Pale Moonlight is I mean, there are a few. Obviously that one, Pale Moonlight, The Visitor. I mean,
the stuff with I think Eddington stands out for me.
The Lucky
Launch torpedoes.
Launch those torpedoes.
So this brings up a thought for me then. So in terms of, I mean, you imply there some elements of the planning that went into your writing process, sort of the forethought and, staking out how you're going to complete this project. What is that like to do with a book about a character like this?
It's nuts. It's nuts. It's nuts. George Sanderson is the managing editor for Titan Books, and he was my editor, and just an all-around great person. And we had a great conversation about when he brought me on board, and we had a great conversation about just Star Trek Deep Space Nine and our impressions and ideas of where to go and how to do this. And I told him my thoughts of where I thought this should go and where I want this to go. And he was like, "Oh, I like that. And he was like, "All right." Because I think, well, I know one of the ways they wanted to go was that they were thinking about, because Jake is a writer, and he's written like in the timeline, the canon, he's written Anselm, and that's autobiographical, so that's a way to do it. But I felt this should be Benjamin Sisko's words, his voice. We have 4 other captains and it's their voices, and those other Titan books. I have them. And I went and reread them, and those books are done so well. I just wanted it also to be this captain to be his voice as well. I feel people are going to get the set and stuff. They want all the captains. They don't want it to be, even though we know Ben's situation at the end. I was like, there's a way we can do this, and I was like, explaining what I had my idea for my way. And he was like, "Oh, I like that. We'll go with that." So it was a little nuts, because once that way was agreed upon, then I had to deliver that way, So
right. That's how you sold it. So
right. I had to deliver that, and I was like, "Oh, okay." Yeah. But that was the fun part, and then writing an outline and then getting that outline approved, which was interesting, because I realized once you write the outline, you're locked in, because usually when I write, I come up with new stuff as I'm writing, But in this case, this was the first time I'm like, oh, I can't do that. I have to take the time, slow it down, take the time, write the outline, plan out the outline. You can put everything I want in it, because once I'm locked in, I can't give crazy surprises, outside of the outline as well.
Could you give us an example of a crazy surprise you didn't do?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, you're not gonna have Ben have a time crystal, right?
Right.
Right. You're not gonna have Ben have a time crystal, because then you'd be like, what? That's a little weird, because then, how are you going to do that, and how are you going to explain that? And then time crystals on Chronos, and so yeah. That's
he's already got the wormhole aliens, so
right. So I think
CBS
would have looked at me and been like, what? What are you doing with that? That doesn't
save the trip to Borath. You're okay.
Right. They would have been like, that don't make no sense, man.
First thing I thought too, because I really like the Janeway one. And
right.
Of course, it's an autobiography being told after the fact of the show Voyager. And the first thing I thought was just like, wait a minute, Ben Sisko, how is he writing an autobiography?
How is he?
But
right.
But it's
we'll find out.
There's celestial temples. There's lots of things going on.
We'll find out.
I think that's why this Benjamin Sisko character, I think, stands out amongst these other protagonists from the different Star Trek series, all the captains, because they all have kind of more complete finishes. They're kind of still out there. Like Picard's still just recently had his whole series. Janeway's been on Prodigy, and we kind of know what happens there. With Sisko, his story ends in 1999 when that show finishes up.
Right.
We're told he goes into the wormhole, and then he says, "Maybe I'll be back in a year." As far as we know,
or maybe yesterday.
He's
right.
We don't even know, but there's and his wife's pregnant, and he's about to have a kid, and we don't even know where any of that goes.
Right.
Have you been reading the comics that are out right now?
I have been. I will say at the time I got this gig, that was around the same time that was announced, and so I didn't read, or I was like, oh, I don't want to know anything, because I don't want any influence, so
don't want to intentionally lead into
right. I didn't, right, and I think that's also fair to those writers, because you don't want to step on anything that they're doing or anything, anything like that. Since I've finished, I've read some of it, and it's good stuff.
It really picks up steam, that story.
It picks up steam.
First couple issues, we were kind of like,
what's going on? What's happening? No, but it picks up steam, and it's great stuff, and it poses some really great questions. And I'm like, oh, and it's funny, because now me thinking about what I've written and thinking about how this all fits, I'm like, oh, this is some interesting stuff. So I think what will be interesting for fans, for everyone, is to do what I'm doing now, is to take a look at everything once the book comes out, and then you can look at the book, you can look at these comics, you can look at it all and be like, oh, okay, how's that go with that, and this with that, and how's that all fit, so it's going to be interesting, it's going to be interesting to see how it all unfolds.
So you were a history major, did I read?
Yeah, well, English major, minors in history and creative writing. So that's important, yeah.
So my question is, if you could set a Star Trek episode or story in a historical setting, because they do it fairly often in Star Trek. It's usually World War II, but they could be a little more creative with their destination. So where would you put one? Well, I'll say that I like doing things differently. I think what I would do is I like a lot of what Gene Roddenberry set up. Gene Roddenberry's a genius. Man's a genius. There's no, and even you look at, it's 57, 58 years running. We're still watching these things from what started from this man's imagination, right? So what I like about what Gene Roddenberry did is he said, okay, we have this peace, we have no famine, no war, no racism, none of that. But all of that happened after World War III. Mm-hmm. And
danced around it a lot in Star Trek. You know, and what I liked about Strange New Worlds, the first episode, is it kind of brushed up against it a little bit. But I would really like to dig into that because
that's great.
That's a lot of really fertile soil, untouched territory. You know, because you know the stuff really hits the fan.
Yeah, right? Well, New York City looks like it blows up in World War III. Sorry,
I mean, right, but you know. First of all, you know, what has to happen for us to get there, and it all goes to hell. And then, you know, it's not like everyone was decimated. So the people that came out of that, good and bad, right? Those were the people that helped forge that future. And then it was only like 20 years after that, I think, maybe 30 after that, if that many, that the Vulcans arrived.
10 years.
10, right? Okay, thank you. That the Vulcans arrived, right? So that's a very short window, right? So that's a lot of fertile ground right there, and you could do a series around all of that, and you would never even have to set foot on a starship, and it would still be Star Trek, because I have this thing that I say that I think every Star Trek episode, movie, book has friendship, hope, science, and exploration, which I call the four foundations of Star Trek. So you could do a whole series with just the whole World War III, leading up to the World War III, and after. And it would still be Star Trek.
Yeah, because like,
my gosh,
when we pick up with Enterprise, like that's 90 years after the Zephyr Cochrane meeting,
right?
But, like, if you remember when Q's in those big judge robes, and that's after First Contact. That's on Earth, right? So that there's that whole like 90-year period where like a lot's going on. There's some nuts
stuff, right? And that's Roddenberry, because what I loved about that Q episode, Farpoint, was Mr. Roddenberry influence. So he was saying there was some nut stuff going on. You know, also remember we have Khan at that period, who's, you know, and the eugenics, and there's a lot of just craziness going on at that time. And it's a lot to dig into, you know. So if I was doing anything, I always like going against type, you know. So, and I know people would probably say, well, you know, we have to have a starship or something. So, you know, maybe it has to be something to do with time travel or something. But I would love to do a World War III period, because it would be cheaper too. It would be cheaper. It would be cost effective, because it would be all like, you know, now, right? You know, and we can see how we got there and how we can get the heck out of some of these messages that we're starting to build for ourselves, you know?
Just the chase for a sleeper ship, man.
Right? I mean, you know, maybe somebody's trying to get
off this rock.
Yeah, because
there's so much you could do with that.
There's so much. I mean, even with the La'an's character on Strange New Worlds, and that whole alternate thing with Kirk, and she found Khan and he was a kid and all that. I was like, oh, that's really cool, because it's all, and you see how fertile all of that is. It's just sitting there, waiting to be told. And so that's what I would love to dig into.
Yeah, like in Enterprise's like opening credits, they show the Zephyr Cochrane ship, and then they show a couple other ships we don't really know. That's right. And then they show Enterprise at the end. But then I'm like, well, you can tell a story about that ship or this whole period.
That time's really kind of encapsulated right now. It's got First Contact on the other end, but like the closest we get to it on the other side is sort of past tense, that two-parter on Deep Space Nine.
Right.
Which is only like what, 20 years before then, or
that's
something?
That's before World War III, though.
But that's what I'm saying. That's the closest we get to it on that side.
Yeah, that's 2 years from now, man.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels granted there, but
you know, Gabriel Bell in the Sanctuary Districts. You know where
it doesn't feel that far fetched.
Right,
it doesn't, man.
You know, that's what's so great about it, and I mean that's why it's so much material that Gene Roddenberry set up. You know, it'd be really cool stuff.
Yeah, so and Gene opened it up to so many great writers like yourself, right? Like who came in.
Yeah,
well, thank you for saying that. But yeah, I mean, but we're all on the shoulders of giants like Gene and everyone from every series. I mean, that's all I'm really doing is I'm looking at Ira Stephen Bear, all the writers of Deep Space Nine. I'm taking what they did, looking at what they did with this character, with this crew, and you know, with all the characters, and saying, okay, just really absorbing all that and taking those people and taking those personalities and, putting them in certain situations, and that's what I did in the short stories. That's, doing to some degree in the autobiography.
I want to ask you about Sisko, but before that, if you could write an autobiography about any non-captain character, who would it be?
Oh, honestly, I really want to write an autobiography. This is really honest. Avery Brooks.
Great. Did you get to talk to him?
No. But Avery Brooks, because I mean, as much as Benjamin Sisko is interesting, the man that is pivotal in helping create Benjamin Sisko is just as interesting, And there's so much about, like, I think his history and and he's so multifaceted that a lot of people don't really realize, and all the things he, filmed.
He's the real most interesting man in the world. Like, they show that guy with the beard. It's actually just Avery Brooks.
Teaching. I mean, he's done Tamberlin, he's done Shakespeare. I mean, he's really cool dude. Other characters, I don't know. I don't know. But a real life person, I would definitely like to do Avery Brooks. That would be dope.
Wow. I'd pre-order that.
Yeah, right.
Because he has an interesting story in his own right. Growing up in Gary, Indiana, and then making his own career in theater and
forging his way. Yeah.
Doesn't that mean he grew up in Janeway's hometown?
Gary, Indiana. She's from another Indiana.
Indiana, yeah.
Bloomfield, Indiana, or something like that. But same state.
Just down the road, maybe. Yeah. So I wanted to bring something up because, but maybe I just have some urge to compete for like biggest nerd in the room. But no, I tease. But I noticed when I was on DerekTylerAttico.com,
I believe it's just DerekAttico.com.
Yeah, just Derek.
That's true. Now that I look at it.
Who's the biggest nerd?
No. You're the bigger pedant. Anyway.
Actually, I have both URLs, so you're both right.
Maybe your winning entry right here. So I noticed that you've written a whole whack of source books. Or been involved in a bunch of source.
I've been involved, yeah.
For the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game.
Yeah. I've been fortunate enough to.
So that's got to be a different way to approach Star Trek. What kind of constraints on writing, or what kind of pieces were you involved with there?
Well, first of all, I would say I was brought into it by Jim Johnson, who's the I guess right now Jim Johnson is, I think, the line editor or managing editor for Star Trek Adventures, and he was also a Strange New Worlds.
Right on. From
one of the Strange, I forget which one, Strange New Worlds. So we all still stay in touch and everything. So he pulled me into that, and the first long form writing that I ever did as a kid, even before that Star Wars script, was I started writing D&D campaigns. And I had to be 13, 14, around there, right? And I started running campaigns and writing them, but I just started writing them out, and I was running the campaigns, and I just started writing out these adventures, and my friends really enjoyed them. And my adventures would go sometimes, a week. They went into like a month, to 3 or 4 months. And I would write these whole long out campaigns. And so it was really interesting that when Star Trek Adventures and Jim offered me that opportunity, it came around like full circle. I'm like, wow, I'm now having the opportunity to write in the world or genre of role playing and kind of like put that hat back on and think like that again, which was really cool.
But so you knew the landscape a little bit in terms of how these rule books kind of go together.
Well, when you write, and the thing is, if you know Star Trek, that's the core thing. You have to know Star Trek, because with Star Trek, you have to know your boundaries and your guardrails, and you have to know where they are. Mm-hmm. And once you know where they are, you know which which ones you can maybe go a little, push a little bit, which boundaries can be pushed and which should never be, and you just intrinsically know from writing it long enough. And also it was just really cool to writing for gaming is nothing like writing short form or long form, because gaming is very open-ended. You don't want to tell people exactly what to do. You just want to give them options and make them feel you want to pull them in, and then once you pull them in, you realize that they have to make the decisions on what happens,
Right.
But give them enough. It's almost like Hitchcock in a sense. I'm a big film buff. It's like Hitchcock's, where you get them to the scene, and then instead of writing the rest of that scene, you let them figure out, the scene.
Right. Yeah, it's like dancing with the question of like over determining what's
Right.
happening, right? Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it's lovely.
So some really cool stuff. I was able to do with that. There was a book called The Shackleton Expanse, which was Modiphius's Games. Modiphius Games and Modiphius Entertainment is the licensee or licensor for Star Trek Adventures, and the Shackleton Expanse is a brand new area that's been approved by CBS. It's a brand new area, never done before. It's only in Star Trek Adventures of the Star Trek universe, which is really cool. And writers like myself, Kelly Fitzpatrick, Dayton Ward, Scott Pearson, we created adventures for the Shackleton Expanse. We created species for the Shackleton Expanse, which was dope. And people can play that book, and they can probably play for like a year straight, just playing Shackleton Expanse, which is really pretty cool.
I just have a question there too. Have you had any exposure to Star Trek Online, the video game?
Not really. Other than like me myself, like trying to figure it out.
Right. It's a complicated game.
It's a complicated game, and I never have enough time to get into it. But I mean, it's really cool. It's visually is dope. But
it's got this whole story inside of it too.
It's
Sisko
huge.
even shows up like talking through the wormhole at one point.
Does.
And these other characters. That's why, because like sometimes Davan and I go back and forth about like what's canon and what's not canon and these kinds of things. And
I'm a believer in headcanon myself.
Headcanon, like
The things you like, put them in there.
Right. And so these like other kind of like novels and things like that, or video games or whatever, gets kind of put out there, and sometimes you'll see writers pick it up, like we saw like in Star Trek Picard, they put the Enterprise F from Star Trek Online in.
That's right.
So sometimes they will, but sometimes, but often not, or sometimes like these great stories don't get incorporated into like the bigger universe because not enough people have been exposed to it or whatever. I guess is the rationale. But I wish they would. Sorry, but
no. I'm sorry. I think the general rule is if it's on screen, meaning big screen or small screen, it's canon.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. And then anything else, it can become canon, like you're saying. Like Enterprise F, which was great. I know Control, which is I think from a David Mack book, got into Discovery.
Right.
So things can it can happen. It can happen.
And some of these ideas that you might put forward in this autobiography potentially will get picked up in the future, or who's to say?
It's going in my head canon. I've added the autobiographies and A Stitch in Time by Andrew Ross.
Oh,
which is basically an autobiography.
I'm going through that now for the first time, and it's phenomenal.
It's amazing.
My God, what a treat! What a treat!
Yeah, he just did the audio version. And speaking of which, so you have to talk to Avery Brooks because we have to get him to do the audio version of this book, right?
That is the number one question people ask me at conventions. They don't say hello to me. They say yeah, hello, whatever. Is Avery Brooks doing the? And I say I don't know. I don't. That's above my security clearance. I don't know. In all honesty, I think my personal opinion, because I do not know anything, my personal opinion is, I guess, A, if it does well, and B, if he reads it and likes it. I would imagine, I would imagine those two things. If those two things happen in concert, I would hope, but I have no idea. I have no idea.
Well,
Will
we'll
there be an
probably do
audio
like
version?
5 to 10 shows on it, so it'll get lots of exposure from it.
But I guess my question: will there be an audio version, or is that not currently like on?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I haven't been made aware. I have not been made aware. So like I said, it's that's above my that there's my security level clearance, and then there's like Sloan level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so
You gotta treat us like the Sloan.
right. That's a section 51, and I'm not invited to that party. So yeah.
Okay.
So to write an autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, you must have had to sample a lot of Creole food, or really become an expert in it. Really.
Don't forget about the paprika. Paprika.
That's like Eastern European. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh.
I will say something that I will let a little something out. I will say that in this autobiography, New Orleans is another character in this autobiography.
Right.
And I had to do a lot of research on New Orleans because I'm not obviously from New Orleans, but I respect the town, I respect the people. I think it was brilliant to make this Benjamin Sisko and the Sisko family from there. I see why, and I thought a lot about that. Why are you putting this Starfleet captain in this town? What does that mean? What are the ramifications of that? Forward and backwards. So I did a lot of work on that, and I think New Orleans is another character in the autobiography.
Music, food, like it all just trickles into his character, right?
You'll have to see.
Yeah. Well, we have a
the
connection
restaurant,
to that part
right?
of the world up here in Nova Scotia. The Cajun thing, the Acadian thing, the Cajun thing.
Right. So you'll see things you recognize for sure.
Yeah.
And like the whole like incorporating, because he's got 3 technically half siblings, because we find out in season 7 of Deep Space Nine that they have different mothers with his siblings, because Sisko's mom is a possessed prophet lady, or something. And so so just in, I guess, expanding on his early life, because we don't get a ton of that in the show. We only want him and his dad kind of in passing mention. We never see any of the siblings. Not that that's the worst thing, because a lot of Star Trek characters like Jedzia Dax mentions his family we never see, and like there's a lot of them that we don't really get into that.
No, you're right, but
They
the
do
real
mention-
youth we see is through Curzon.
Yeah,
We don't really see it in we see that sort of wildness portrayed through his relationship with
we
Curzon.
learn more about Ezri Dax in one season than we do about Jedzia Dax. Like it's
Yeah. In regards to his siblings, you really don't learn about you. He mentions, I think, once or twice that he has 2 brothers
and a sister. Yeah,
And Judith, who doesn't like restaurants.
It's not until I think 7th season that he mentions he has a sister.
Yeah.
right.
And I think if anything was really difficult for me, it was that. It was like, okay, it's only mentioned is like once or twice, and what am I going to do about that? Why is that? Who are these individuals? So that was a little interesting to figure out and to do. But I think everyone's going to be pleased with what I came up with for those. Yeah.
They just mentioned like a very sweet relationship he had with his, I guess, foster mother.
Right, and his foster mother, right. Yeah, it's a very interesting origin, right? Or his origin story is, is very interesting.
And there's 2 other, I guess, main relationships I would be really interested to learn more about in this autobiography. One would be his first wife, Jennifer Sisko,
right?
The mother of Jake Sisko, and Curzon Dax is the other one,
right? What's that about?
I'm always confused as to what was this relationship. What was Curzon doing on the ship that he was talking to this like 20-year-old ensign all the time? There's a lot of questions.
I just really it's like where you could make a Hangover movie in the Star Trek universe, right?
It's in the autobiography. It's in the autobiography.
Oh, well, hey, we got to read it to find out.
Counting down the days.
These
are all things that you're right, and all things that I thought about.
Awesome. Because I want to know about him with that Vulcan guy back at the academy. I want to hear about
That's great. Yeah.
his years on even dealing with the crisis of the Borg incident. His wife being killed at Wolf 359. What he did sort of in between that and taking over Deep Space Nine, because I know he goes to Utopia Planitia and designs Defiant, among other things. But
all that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If only I had thought about all that, right? I mean,
I just love the look on your face while you're talking, Dave. Derek's just like, I know all this stuff.
I can't say anything.
I know the answers to everything.
But yeah, those are things that's crucial, and I thought about those things.
Awesome. Okay. Well, as long as you thought about them, I'm my mind is at ease.
Well, maybe I can take this into a direction in whatever time we have left. So for me, one of the really interesting thematics of Sisko, particularly in relation to family, is the way in which, I think I'm still kind of riffing on like him and Benny from the start in a way, but like the way in which the distance in relationships can be a really profound element in Star Trek relationships. Thinking about, Captain Janeway and Mark, for instance, the long absent Mark, or all of these kind of questions about like people who are light years and light years away that you might be able to talk to, but you have a different sense of proximity and intimacy with, right? And when, if a family gets far flung, right? Like if somebody ends up
right,
Konos and somebody else is way down to your Beetlejuice and then I'm on Deep Space Nine, how often are you ever going to see each other? It's like going back to the 17th or 18th century again when somebody travels and they're just that's where they are from now on,
right. No, you're right. Yeah
we've talked about that on the Cuters of Trek there too, because like in such a Starfleet kind of way of life, you would have to be so choosy about who you remain in contact with.
Right, that's a great point. Living in the 24th century, right? Because you may not see your friend for years, right? Or via subspace, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting point. You're talking about the everyday, the day to day of living in that era. That's really a cool point. I can speak a little bit to that, and I can say, I think there just in life, and even in this autobiography, we always have two families. You have the one that you're born into, and the one that either you choose or the one that chooses you. And I think how you if you are smarter, I guess you could say, sometimes you should stay in touch with people. I know personally, there are times that I haven't stayed in touch with people that I wish I had. And I've had to learn that lesson and make a point of staying in touch with people, because once you lose those connections, sometimes you can't gain them back, or sometimes it's harder to gain them back. So I'm saying all that to say that, like life, this book is a lot about family. And I don't think that's giving away anything, because the man is about family.
Oh yeah,
man is about
maybe the most family centric of all the Star Trek characters I can really think of. And to your point, Dave, like remember Cassidy Yates' brother is playing in that baseball league, and it takes like 8 weeks just to get there.
Right.
He's like, I'll do it though for a baseball game. Come on.
Maybe my
60 weeks, Kira. Here are the keys.
I'll see you in I'll see you in 2 months. I mean, that's got to be hard on relationships. It's got to be crazy on relationships. And which comes back around. It's interesting because a lot of things I've started to realize in writing this, I started to see the wisdom, what I call the wisdom of Roddenberry, because I remember like when I started watching Next Gen, I was like, families on starships, that's nuts. But you start to understand Gene Roddenberry is ahead of a lot of us, right? Because he's like, this is what we're talking about. That you're having your loved ones so far away, you need them with you. You need them with you. Because you're so far away now. And with the time dilation of warp speed and stuff, you literally you're going faster than light, so people are aging at different ratios now, right? So, well, maybe not in Star Trek, but they should be. And if it's hard science, right, they should be technically aging differently. Because at the speed of light, things start to happen differently on planet than off planet. So, I think it's great to have people on starships and have families on starships. But then you look at what happened to Ben.
Yeah, and Jennifer.
And right, that's what I'm saying. So,
right.
Well, I think that's what the Heisenberg compensator does. Whenever you're like, why are they aging, not aging and stuff? It's just like, oh yeah, Heisenberg compensator.
Oh yeah, Heisenberg's.
It's compensating.
Right. But I mean, he lost his wife because she was with him. You know.
Yeah.
So
I sometimes play this clip, with just when he's wailing, just when she's dying.
Damn it! We just can't leave her here.
I just watched that episode again today. What a way to start a series, though. It's just like not only do you put him through the ringer, but also
here's your main character.
Put him at odds with the hero captain everyone loves. Like
and he's chewing out Picard, and you're like, what is this show? You know? And
like, what is he doing? It's like, is this guy the bad guy?
Pilot.
Oh, it's a great pilot.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Right. Again, on the first go, when it first came out, I was like, it's not next gen, just like how next gen was an original series. And
right.
A while to adjust to it. But looking back on it, it's awesome. It's my favorite.
Yeah. Another thing too, I'd be interested to read in the book too, like kind of like contrary to the fading connections of friendship and family you can get in that kind of a world, but like his kind of like never ending connection, it seems, with Dax. It's just like in some form or another, there's always seems to be a Dax in his life. And
it's interesting. Yeah. Well, I will say after you gentlemen read it, you could email me or have me back on or whatever you guys want.
We'd love to have you back on.
Yeah. We could talk about it, with the security clearance gone, and I could be like, see, this and that and that and this, and
That's right. We'll be read into the program by that point.
Well, there's one question I should ask you before you go, because you say you're a film buff, and one question I always ask our guests over on X-Rated, the X-Men Animated Review Show, is what's your favorite movie? And you don't have to limit it to one, because some people can't do that.
Yeah, it changes from time to time. I'm a big Orson Welles fan. Touch of Evil is a pretty good film. Of course, Citizen Kane. But it changes. I'll see a really good film. I think there are very few perfect films. Raiders is a perfect film. Empire Strikes Back is a perfect film. Miller's Crossing, I think, is a pretty perfect film. Seven is a perfect film. So I'm always looking for, and I say perfect, I mean acting, directing, screenplay, music. Across the board, you look at it and you're like, I'm not finding any faults. Nothing's taking me out of it. So those are like the ones I just said. Those are like the ones that I just could watch, all day, every day. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, before we let you go, I'll bring it back to Star Trek here. What do you think is the greatest strength and greatest weakness of Star Trek as a franchise?
The greatest strength, that's the easiest one. The strength is those four things that I said: exploration, hope, science, and friendship, because it builds those in us. Weakness. I mean, I think it's amazing. It's a TV show. It's really weird to think about it, but this is a show that people are trying to make money with. So it's almost amazing that it's getting so many themes and good things across while still making money. When you really think about that. I think if I was to say anything, I don't think there's a weakness of it yet. But I have a fear that it will eventually be distilled down, or it will eventually, it will run its course. I certainly hope not. I don't believe it will, because it's become, at least for me, it's modern day mythology, and I feel like modern day mythology, like comic books. We've seen Batman, Superman; those characters are are almost, they feel in some ways immortal and eternal. And I feel like Star Trek and that universe, if not the characters, that universe should go on, for another 100 years. I would be happy with that. And I don't want to see that go away. But I know it's a business, so I just want to see it in some form beyond, for the next 100 years. That's what I want to see.
And well said. And in a world too, where like there's kind of a more desire for just churning out content faster and things. Watered down a bit.
Yeah.
But have you watched? Are you keeping up with Strange New World season 2?
Oh yeah.
Well, there was 2 episodes of that I thought like brought all the hope back. I'm like, oh, Star Trek hasn't gone anywhere. And
Right. Yeah,
under the cloak of war.
It's secure. It's secure. It's not going anywhere. It's really on all flying on all thrusters right now. It's full speed ahead. It's doing well, and it's in the hands of good people on both sides of the camera. And every iteration. Prodigy, Lower Decks, Discovery, which I really like, and I think Discovery is this generation's Deep Space Nine. I think 10, 20 years from now, people are going to be saying, "Oh, Discovery wasn't so bad." Watch.
Hey,
for 10, 20 years. Oh, it wasn't so bad. It just needs time. So I think it's all of it's good. All of it's good.
Yeah. Hashtag save Prodigy.
Hashtag save Prodigy, which is a phenomenal show.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
loved it. Yeah.
Well,
It
Dan
got
and I
so
talked
good
about
by
every
the
episode.
end.
Yeah.
We did.
It was picking up, and we're like, "What's happening for season 2?" Which I guess we will get at some point.
We'll get right.
But
So
it just depends where. But Derek, so I know your book, the Autobiography of Benjamin Sisko, the life of Starfleet's legendary captain and emissary, is out October 10th.
Yes.
It can be
Pre-orders.
you can get it on
Pre-order
Amazon.
now. And you can pre-order now, so you'll just get it. It's scheduled for October 10th, but just pre-order it now. It'll drop as soon as it's available.
Okay, so is there hardcover and Kindle versions?
Yeah, ebook and hardcover, and that's U.S. and international pre-order. So you can
And
pre-order.
Canadians even?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
Got mine coming.
I'm going to pre-order mine now.
Get on it.
That was the question. Our longtime listener Sam asking, will it be in stores?
Yes.
Which stores do you know?
I think everybody's carrying it. If you have a local bookstore and you're not sure, the thing to do is go to your local bookstore and say, "Hey, I'd like you to carry this. I'm gonna purchase it." And what they'll do is they will give them the ISBN number, the 10 or the 13-digit ISBN number, and they will just order it for you. And you can just do it like that. Whether it's a big retail, like a Barnes and Noble, or a mom and pop, and they'll just order it for you.
I guess our big one's Indigo up here.
Indigo, you hear that? Indigo chapters fill the shelves. With this one. All right. Well, thanks a lot again, Derek. We can't wait to have you back after we read the book. That's going to be so fun.
It'll be a pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen. And this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed. I had a good time.
Yeah.
It was really great to meet you.
You too, everyone. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, we do episode recaps, which I kind of lead through my division, the red division of Live Long and Podcast. So we talk about Deep Space Nine Enterprise episodes, the new ones. We'd love for you to come on with us sometime and talk about an episode.
Sure. Anytime.
We do silly games as well. We do silly games.
And we do radio theaters and all kinds of fun little Star Trek stuff here.
I'm all in. Anytime, just let me know. I'm all in.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Excelsior.
There's
Excelsior, right?
Well, there's only, I guess, one phrase left remaining.
That's true. End transmission.
Transmission.